Libra, the end of a 13-year karma. There's a number that repeats itself too often in Libra's life: 13. It's not luck, nor a curse. It's the time it takes for the same emotional pattern to close on its own without warning. That tiredness that no amount of rest can resolve, that relationship that returns in a different guise. It could be the same cycle reaching its final point. What if your calmness was never rest, but only the interval between two movements you never chose? By the end of this video, something within you will make sense like never before. You know that it's a strange feeling to be at peace on the outside, while inside some gear keeps turning, calculating, adjusting. One side of the scale goes up, the other goes down, and you're stuck there, in the middle, trying to keep them both at the same level, without realizing that this effort has a price, and that price has been charged for longer than you imagine. No one is born knowing how to balance like that. It's something you learn, and you usually learn it early, in an environment where keeping calm was safer than being overheard. A home where silence prevented arguments. A childhood where yielding was easier than arguing. Libra learned, without realizing it, that its role was to be the balance point, never the weight on either side. And it worked. For years it worked. The problem is that scales don't choose where they go. They only react to the weight placed on the extremes. And Libra, without realizing it, allowed others to place weight on both sides, while it itself became lighter and lighter, further and further removed from the very balance it tried so hard to maintain. Have you ever noticed that there's a recurring number when Libra talks about their own life? It's not always the same event, it's not always the same person, but the time between one cycle and another tends to rhyme. A recurring relationship, a returning professional pattern, a feeling of "I've been through this before" that isn't mystical, it's emotional mathematics. And the number that appears, with a frequency that's almost uncomfortable, is 13. 13 years is, on average, the time it takes Libra to repeat the same cycle of surrender, adjustment, and silence until it closes on its own. It's not a curse. It's not destiny written in the stars, literally. It's the time it takes for a person to accumulate enough weight on the wrong side of their own scale until something inside them simply can't take the swinging anymore. And the strangest thing is that when this cycle begins to close, it doesn't arrive with a big warning, with drama, with a visible collapse. It arrives as a specific kind of tiredness, a tiredness that rest doesn't resolve. You sleep well, eat well, take vacations, and yet you feel that something inside you is dragging on, like a wind-up clock nearing its end, ticking slower with each turn. There's a protective mechanism at play here, which Libra uses unconsciously. With each threatening conflict, some part of Libra acts before deciding, softening the tone, finding a middle ground, offering a bridge before being asked. Used tirelessly, year after year, what was once a choice becomes a reflex, and a reflex becomes identity. There's a silent version of power in this. Whoever controls the weather wields an influence that no one names. Libra rarely sees itself exercising power, but keeping everyone calm is control turned inward, exacting its price from whoever wields it. If you've ever felt this way and never knew how to explain it, perhaps what's happening isn't weakness or common exhaustion. Perhaps it's the exact moment when the pendulum, after 13 years swinging between what you feel and what others expect, is finally losing the force that kept it swinging endlessly. And there it hangs, suspended in the air, the question of what remains of a person when the movement that always defined them is gone. When the movement that had always defined her, all that balance she had carried for so long, would simply stop swaying. What would remain? An empty person, or a person who, for the first time, was whole? It was while searching for answers to this that I found this digital book, The Divine Path That Guides Your Zodiac Sign to a Life of Purpose, doesn't talk about destiny in the superficial sense of the word. It speaks precisely to what Libra most needs to understand right now, that there is a difference between maintaining harmony with others and maintaining one's own internal structure. The book explores this distinction, like someone reorganizing a space that has been disorganized for years, not bringing anything from the outside, but repositioning what Libra already carries within, so that the weight is finally distributed on both sides, including their own. If you've made it this far, feeling something stirring inside, an unsettling recognition, almost a relief mixed with discomfort, that's no coincidence. It's a sign that some part of you already knew this before you heard it. And it's in this state, still processing with the question open-ended, that it makes sense to act. Because after the routine returns, this clarity tends to get lost again in the noise of daily life. The link is in the first pinned comment, but be aware, this content may be taken down. Click now and download your copy. Meanwhile, tell me in the comments below, in which area of your life do you feel you've been wavering for longer than you'd like, no longer able to tell if it's you or just a habit you've learned to call yourself? Because there's a huge difference between karma as punishment and karma as a silent consequence. No one is sitting somewhere noting the times Libra has given in too much. There's no cosmic judge with a list of debts. What exists is simpler, and at the same time harder to accept, an account that only Libra opened and that only Libra can close. A bank account that hasn't received a deposit in years isn't punished by anyone. It simply remains empty, because that's how accounts work. And the same happens to a person who only knows how to deposit into others. Think about how many times, at a family gathering, Libra was the one who chose the restaurant everyone else liked, except her. How many times, in a group of friends, was she the one who gave up the time, the place, the last word, just so that no one would leave upset? In isolation, each of these choices seems small, almost insignificant, a gesture of kindness, nothing more. But kindness that is never reciprocated ceases to be a choice and becomes a function, and functions repeated for years, without pause, without review, are exactly the raw material from which cycles are made. None of these scenes in isolation would seem sufficient reason for such profound weariness, and it is precisely this harmless appearance that makes the pattern last so long without being questioned. This idea changes everything, because it removes the burden of an external force and returns the power within. If no one but herself is demanding this emotional debt, then no one but herself has the authority to forgive her. There is no prayer, no ritual, no external excuse that will solve this, because the problem was never outside. And perhaps that's why so many Libras spend their lives seeking external validation for a wound that only heals from within. It's common, in fact, to see Libras confuse this accumulated fatigue with a character flaw. They think, I should be able to handle this, other people can. But other people aren't carrying the same kind of burden. Most of them never had to learn from an early age that their acceptance depended on keeping their surroundings comfortable. Comparing their own fatigue to that of others without considering the distinct origins of each is just another way of demanding something from themselves that no one else is demanding. And that's why this pattern rarely appears only once. It repeats itself in different relationships with different people, as if it were a script that Libra memorized without realizing it. The partner changes, the context changes, but the role she occupies within the relationship is usually the same. The one who adjusts, the one who understands, the one who knows how to wait. At work, something similar happens. She becomes the person who resolves conflict within the team, who holds onto the project when no one else wants to take it on, who accepts the extra task because refusing would create discomfort she prefers to avoid. It's no coincidence that these roles repeat themselves. It's the same mechanism, dressed in different contexts, waiting for the same turning point. If you feel you're demanding a debt from yourself that no one else is demanding, perhaps this is exactly the moment to reorganize that account from within. The digital book, the divine path that guides your zodiac sign to a life of purpose, works on this internal reconciliation, not as forgiveness that comes from the outside, but as a restructuring of how you yourself distribute value between yourself and others. The last copies are running out, and this content may be taken down at any time. The link is in the first pinned comment. The last copies are running out. Click now and begin your journey towards the clarity and genius you deserve. But what's perhaps hardest to swallow isn't the fact that the account ended up empty. It's realizing that all this time, Libra treated its own side of the scale as if it didn't matter, as if adding weight there were selfishness and not basic maintenance of any structure that needs to support itself. A two-pan balance doesn't really work when one side is always empty just so the other appears full. That's not balance. It's distortion disguised as generosity. Remember the rope that stretches a little with each use until one day, without warning, it no longer stretches. That's exactly what happens in the last few months before the cycle closes. Small things that Libra used to absorb effortlessly, an impolite comment, a last-minute request, a responsibility that wasn't theirs, begin to weigh disproportionately. They themselves are startled by their own irritation because they don't recognize this reaction in themselves. Except it's not the rope getting weak. It's the rope warning, in the only way you know how, that it has stretched enough for an entire cycle. And here lies perhaps the most unsettling paradox of all. The more Libra tried to keep others balanced, the more she herself fell off center. She thought she was being the stable center of everything around her, when in reality she was emptying herself little by little so that others would appear whole. And nobody noticed, not even her, because silent imbalance makes no noise, doesn't cry for help. It just accumulates year after year until it completes an entire cycle. This type of imbalance has a cruel characteristic. It's practically invisible to outsiders. People around Librans often describe them as calm, gentle, and easy to get along with, and it's precisely this apparent fluidity that hides the constant effort behind it. No one sees the emotional calculation that happens before each softened word, before each swallowed opinion, before each, "Okay, it can be your way," said in a calm voice, but felt as yet another small renunciation. It's an internal work that doesn't appear in any external portrait, and perhaps that's why it takes so long, 13 years on average, for its own weight to become visible even to the one who carries it. Recognizing this silent accumulation, coin by coin, year after year, is the first step that many people avoid taking, because it hurts more to realize the weight than to continue carrying it automatically. The digital book, the divine path that guides your zodiac, sign to a life of purpose, exists precisely for this moment of recognition. It helps Libra to see, one by one, the small renunciations that have transformed into this heavy treasure chest, without judgment, only with clarity. The last units are practically sold out, and the content may be removed without prior notice. The link is in the first pinned comment. The last copies are running out. Click now and begin your journey towards the clarity and genius you deserve. So what changes when she finally decides to put weight on her own plate? At first, almost nothing seems different on the outside. But inside, something reorganizes itself in a way that can't be undone. The opinions she held back begin to surface. The desires she postponed begin to take hold. And most surprisingly, the relationships that depended on her imbalance begin to adjust on their own. Some become healthier, others simply don't withstand the change. And this, contrary to what she always feared, is not destruction. It's a natural selection of bonds. There's a specific fear behind this change, and it's worth naming it honestly. The fear that, by ceasing to sway for others, Libra will cease to be loved. This fear makes sense. It stems from a time when keeping everything calm truly guaranteed affection. But the affection that only exists while she suppresses herself is not the same kind of affection that endures when she begins to fully exist. And it is precisely there that most discover something unexpected. The people who only stayed around because of her imbalance tend to drift away on their own, without drama, while those who truly mattered remain now in a more honest relationship than before. It's worth noting that this change doesn't require a dramatic upheaval, no abrupt break with who Libra has always been. She doesn't need to stop being generous, nor stop valuing harmony. That remains a real and beautiful part of her. What changes is subtle, almost silent. Before automatically yielding, she begins to wonder if that concession is a choice or a reflex. Before softening an opinion, she checks if she's softening it out of genuine care or old fear. It's a small pause, almost invisible to outsiders, but one that completely changes the direction in which the scales tip over time. This pause, small as it is, functions as a new habit being built upon an old one. And like any new habit, it stumbles at the beginning. There will be days when Libra will realize too late that they gave in again reflexively. There will be days when the guilt of having said no will weigh more than the relief of having said it. This is not failure, it's just the time any pattern change takes to establish itself. The important thing is not to do it perfectly from day one, but to keep noticing, keep asking, until the pause ceases to be a conscious effort and gradually becomes the new, natural way of balancing, a way that finally includes Libra itself in the equation. If this idea of finally putting weight on your own side of the scale has resonated with something real within you, perhaps it's time to take the first practical step in that direction. The divine path that guides your zodiac sign to a life of purpose was designed precisely for this moment, not to teach Libra to abandon the harmony they so highly value, but to show how to include themselves within it, without guilt. This material may be discontinued at any moment, and the last units are already running out. You already possess the genius, you just need to unlock it. Access is in the first comment, but the last units are disappearing. Click now and begin this transformation. Because in the end, what Libra was calling 13 years of karma was never a sentence. It was an internal clock, marking the time it would take until she finally heard what she had been trying to tell herself all along. That true balance is not the absence of weight, but its honest distribution. The pendulum, when it stops, doesn't become broken or empty. For the first time, it becomes centered, not because it stopped feeling, but because it stopped swinging only for others. There is a subtle but decisive difference between a scale that never moves and a scale that has finally found its resting point after years of restless oscillation. The first is rigid, lifeless, incapable of responding to anything. The second is the opposite. It still feels the weight of everything around it, still perceives every nearby movement. Only now it responds from a center that includes itself, and not despite itself. This is the kind of balance that no childhood taught Libra, but that it can learn now, alone, without haste, without a deadline set by anyone but itself. There's something almost poetic about the fact that the number 13, so often associated with bad luck, the end of difficult cycles and ruptures, is precisely the number that marks, in the lives of so many Libras, the moment when a pattern finally runs its course to give way to something else. It's not the end of Libra. It's the end of a version of Libra that learned as a child that existing in peace meant disappearing a little each day to fit into the space left over after accommodating everyone else. This version can rest now, not because it was defeated, but because it fulfilled what it had to fulfill and no longer needs to bear the weight of keeping everything standing alone. There isn't a specific day marked on the calendar when this happens definitively, nor a ceremony to seal this ending. It happens slowly, almost imperceptibly, One day, Libra realizes they disagree with someone without apologizing 3 times afterward. Another day, they realize they spent an entire Sunday resting without feeling they should be solving someone's problem. Small, almost banal signs that together prove the pendulum has finally found its place to stop. And it is precisely in this tranquil banality that the most important turning point of all resides. Not a visible miracle, but an ordinary life lived from a center that now includes themselves. And perhaps this is the most beautiful stillness Libra can achieve. Not the silence of someone who has given up on keeping everything in order, but the silence of someone who has finally understood that they were part of that order all along. 13 years was the time it took for a pattern to close. What comes after has no set deadline, no cycle counting down in the background. It's just the simple and rare experience of existing without needing to shake things up to prove that it exists. And that, more than any answer to the stars, is the kind of peace that no clock can measure.